Hey everybody, I'm Dan Ryan with M Squared. I'm with my co-host Anthony Rapichulo from PR Cision, Mike Bloomfield from Techie Geek, and we're here with our guest Scott Setaro from Too Many Topics podcast. Welcome today.
Welcome. Thank you for having me, guys.
Welcome. So we usually like to kick off and get started with one of our favorite segments called Raps Rant. What do we
now
got?
For today's Raps Rant.
Scott, just so you know, he made that himself. His own insurance, his own Raps Rant. Completely custom. He loves me more than my wife.
Definitely have some talent over there.
Unbelievable.
All right, so let's go. What do we got today?
So today's Raps Rant is using alternative means of media and content creation to promote an overall brand. And by that I mean, in today's day and age, marketing has changed, as we all know. And brands, businesses, even established brands and businesses, as well as small brands and businesses, need to do things other than sell. They need to educate. They need to appear in places you wouldn't typically think that they are. And through creating that content and through creating those other vehicles and ways to find them, they ultimately drive their brand. So I want to riff a little bit on your thoughts on that. Alternative content creation to promote a singular brand or entity.
I think you touched on a couple different things there. You like sales. You're always going to need sales, right? That's the driver.
Said the sales guy.
But being out there, being relevant, doing things that are modern are what's going to keep your business going, and it's going to make you unique, especially in markets that are changing. People don't know the future. We're coming out of a really weird time in the world. So to be out there to do alternative things, it makes your brand current.
Isn't that what we're doing? Alternative things?
I think so.
You make it sound dirty. Scott, what are your thoughts? What do you think?
Well, for starters, I feel like I'm in a deposition, I'll be honest. I've been in depositions that were less scary than this right now. But yeah, absolutely. I think that what worked yesterday doesn't work today, right? What won yesterday's games is not necessarily going to win tomorrow's. I was in a room one day and they had a study of 400 people and they said, and you probably heard this as well, you know, how many people either record something or watch it, not like we did where we had to wait Tuesday afternoon at 7 o'clock for something to come on. You're able to watch it whenever you want. So, 70% of the room raised their hand. And then the next question was, well, of that 70%, how many of you fast forward through the commercials? And they all kept their hand up. And the premise to it was, commercials are $1 billion industry and everyone's fast forwarding through them, right? So I think that businesses today are forced to find alternative means to get their message out there. But more importantly, I just think that people sometimes reverse engineer it the wrong way. They have their product and they try to push it in different ways. I think, especially with platforms like this, it's building a community first and then being able to push your content to that community. I think that's where most people win out on the average person that just has their product and tries to force it on people.
Agree.
Well, consumption's different, right? Like the attention spans are wildly different from when we grew up. So when we were watching Full House and TGI Friday and everything else like that.
I'm still watching that.
So
at least my daughter is.
The average TV show ran over 3.5 minutes before they had a commercial break because that was what the attention spans were. So they'd refresh, re-engage, get people back into the show by showing them other content, which was the 30-second commercial spots and different things that would run on broadcast television. Now the average attention span is 3 seconds, right? So you have to be relevant and get yourself in front of qualified eyes in a 3-second window to resonate, to make sure that you're making sense. And I think that's another part of why alternative media is important, because it's creating something besides what you're doing. It's building up the person and it's humanizing who you are.
But it's also like you almost have to give the punchline first. And when you look on TikTok and you watch on Instagram Reels, you're seeing the punchline or the outcome first, and then they're hoping you're going to go, oh, wow, that was cool, and then watch the rest of it. So it's backwards.
So not to give Dan too much credit, because I don't really like to do this, but I'm going to use Scott as an example. So you're familiar with the Grace Foundation?
Sure.
Okay. What they've done is they've created a podcast series / webinar series / video series. It's everything in one, correct? It's pretty much everything.
Correct.
Video,
/drama.
/drama.
It's a training program as well.
And it's a training program, which I didn't even know, and I should know that. However, the idea is that this nonprofit is now doing this cast series with Dan, who's great, as a means by which to drive traffic to learn about the Grace Foundation. So that's kind of what I mean by that. And I think you're doing a great job with that.
Thanks.
And I think it makes a lot of sense that the Advance is doing that as well. So again, people have to think outside the box. Not sales, it's education. It's not you're selling a home, you're selling marketing. It's, hey, this guy is doing this. Let's figure out what it is that he does, and then maybe we'd be interested in doing business with him.
Well, let me ask you a question. To that point, do you think that demographics matter?
I would say yes and no. I would say if you're running ads, yes. But
Right,
if we're
because
just
my son,
pumping out content,
only has a attention span of probably your 3 seconds, right? 6 seconds. There's something called digital dementia. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's children today that just can't focus because of the fact that they're so inclined to swiping left and being on to the next thing. But then if you look demographically at our demographic, I'm a little older than you guys. I'm not going to divulge my age, but that's okay.
It's not true.
We're more looking for education, nostalgia, different things than children are looking for today. So I really think that it has to do with your brand and not necessarily, your demographic and not necessarily how it goes out there, because of the fact that if you could have the greatest content in the world, but if it isn't reaching that right demographic, you're going to have a hard time translating.
Well, so to that point, Staten Island has a statistic of a per person greater number than average for people who are on the autism spectrum, right?
Unfortunately.
So this is the demographics of this market. It makes sense. Now, we have a lot of offerings for adults with disabilities in this community, and I would argue with people probably the best in the country. My sister-in-law has Down syndrome. The reason my in-laws don't move, they have a house in South Carolina. They'd rather be there. But the reason they don't move is because the programming and the offerings here are just so much better and more engaged and qualified, and they're different than anywhere else in the country.
100%.
I grew up working at a school for adults with disabilities in Chicago, and it was very sterile, it was very institutional, and it was a great place. And I had tremendous memories working with the participants from that program. But the offerings here at places like the Grace Foundation, Lifestyles, On Your Mark, they're just superior. And the families and the community here in Staten Island want to give in so much to be part of it that, to that point, the demographic matters here because people want to see good things happening within that community.
Absolutely. And to that point, I just know I also do real estate, and I can give you numerous stories where people would relocate just to find out that that state didn't have the services for their child. My wife also is an autistic school teacher, so I get it very, very much so. But it is a problem across the nation that we are very, very privileged to have, the amount that we do have here for not only she does early education, but to your point, also adult, needs as well.
So that's great. So what do you got to say, Mike? What's your
I never
take? You're
have
quiet
anything to
today.
say. I'm quiet today. No, it's really true. You go back to the demographics 100%, and where is the content being consumed? And it's being consumed, and I find this for all ages on YouTube. That right? It's we talk about this a number of times. It's the second biggest search engine.
Absolutely.
Google's your number one.
Owned by number one. That's
Owned by number one.
We got to make a graphic. I want it right here, like this. Ding.
Thing owned by number one, and I find myself, we've spoken about this on Google, right? I'm sorry, on YouTube, right? When we started the podcast and we were having, looking for new equipment, and we're going to get into that with you, Scott. Where do you run to? You don't run to Google to say, what are the best cameras for, podcasting? You go right to YouTube and you're like, what are the best? And you're watching videos and reviews.
But that's our age demographic of education. The point I meant earlier,
Yep.
right? We go there. We don't go there to see Mr. Beast.
No,
We go
okay.
right. We go there to learn something.
Some of us do.
But it's still instant gratification no matter what way you slice it. Whether it's Mr. Beast or whether it's going to learn something.
And it's a visual.
Instant gratification. We're
an
not going to the
intent-based.
library to go look for a how-to fix-it book or a handyman book or whatever.
Right. We no longer want to read the for dummies.
Well,
Remember
that's the key, right? You can go on
fatalities.
Google and find that same information in word type opposed to video.
In seconds.
And I believe that, I could speak for myself. I learn a lot better visually than I do by reading.
And I agree. And I think the other thing, while I'm watching a video, I'm able to do other stuff.
Absolutely.
So you're able to multitask, right? I could have that video in the background, listening, paying attention while I'm catching up on emails and doing stuff. Where if you're reading, that's it. You're reading.
You're plugged in.
My wife's trying to talk to me, and I'm not. I have no idea what she's saying. Michael.
Well, you don't have to be reading, but that's okay.
Yeah, that's called selective hearing.
Selective hearing.
And that's across the board. And then the instant gratification as well, right? You remember when you used to have to wait every week for an episode, and they binge watch completely changed everything. And now here we are, and I'm mad that like Mandalorian on Disney Plus is once a week. Just give it to me all at once. Why do you now make me wait?
It's brilliant.
And Mike, how about
Disney's
the point
a
you made
machine.
earlier about segmenting, right? I can jump to a certain part of that video to learn exactly what I need to learn, opposed to having to read the whole entire article for me to get to the part that I really want.
Right, and the best part on YouTube is the fact that if it's a how-to video, you could see where most people watched, so you
Chapter
could quickly
markers as well.
jump and the chapter markers.
That's what I meant
So you
by-
quickly jump in, and you're like, oh look, everyone was watching this 30-second segment. That must be the important piece. Click it, get your thing, and get out.
Well, that's where the guy fell down or fell out of his chair.
Yeah, because
that's
they
me.
understand the algorithm as well. They understand that retention is very important, right? So sometimes I'm watching a video and I'm just like, get to the point. I just need to, but they have to do that beginning part because that's the part that's going to get the views and it's going to get the algorithm to push their video up. So by having those chapters, to your point, I can just get to the point that I really need to learn about the cable that I really want instead of learning about the camera and everything else before the cable, and have the information that I need at the time that I need it.
Yeah, 100%. So let's talk about your podcast.
Yeah, let's transition over to the M Squared. What we came up with was an idea to talk to businesses and partners and friends in the community about building brands. So you have a really great brand that you've been building out. We'd love to hear a little bit about it, and then us starting this venture. What are some tips, tricks? How do we make ourselves relevant in this space?
Well, I think that just to back up, you gave me a lot there.
I tend to do that.
Dump it all in once.
Yeah, no. Why
And we want it quick,
Why we
15
started
seconds.
was because we felt that, to your point earlier, that people absorb content in different ways today, and one being podcasts. I think will continue to grow and grow and grow. It's a lot easier to on your way home from work to listen to something and absorb content that way. It's efficient, right? You can multitask as you're doing it. So that was the number one reason why we started. Obviously, I have a passion to disseminate information. Obviously, my podcast, Too Many Topics, is very broad, which kind of goes against the norm of what podcasts should be. Because if you would do any research on how to start a podcast, the very first thing they're going to tell you is find a niche, right? And kind of go towards that niche. I kind of went completely against that because I feel that I didn't want to pigeonhole us into just one topic or one sense of what we're going to do. It gives us the flexibility of being able to bring on guests. It gives us the ability to be some sort of a news outlet of different types of news, whether it be sports, whether it be self-help, whether it be real estate, whether it be investing. It gave us a different platform. But my true passion was to build a community. That's always what I've felt, that no matter what it is that you try to sell, quote unquote sell or get something out there, if you don't have a product behind you, if you don't have a community behind you, it's going to be very difficult. You could have the best product in the world, if nobody's looking at it, it's going to be hard to sell, right? So that was really our premise behind starting it. It started evolving in different directions because that's what happens, right? It's a fluid situation. 1 minute, it's me and Tommy just making fun of everything in the Advance. Not to say the Advance, but
You could say that.
local news, right?
No one reads it anyway. Don't
No, well, I'm just saying you can talk about everything from. I do, so that's where I get some of my content.
Fodder.
109 pizzerias on Staten Island in a 70 square mile area, which
And that's just Annandale.
and I was going to say 3/4 of it's a dump. So it's are we really 70 square miles to reality shows where a woman has somebody living with 5 guys for a week? It's just there's so many different ways. So we started that way, and then you start to just evolve into different things of what you like to do. And to your point, in starting a podcast, I believe in authenticity. I believe in, it doesn't matter what your podcast is about. But if you're not passionate about the topics, if you don't care about the information that you're giving out to the community, and you're going to be one of these people that, finds an AI bot that tells you what's the topics today to talk about.
That's this guy.
And you're not really passionate about
ChatGPT it all day.
Yeah.
Stop giving my secrets away.
He's actually not even here. It's a hologram.
It's not even there, right? So I think that being authentic is probably the most important thing when trying to develop a podcast.
But that goes with everything, right? That no matter if in your business, your personal life, building a brand, if you're passionate about it, other people see that and they feed off of that.
Absolutely.
Right. We were talking about that earlier, before we sat down. We haven't even released our podcast yet, like a final cut, but we've released a ton of content. And we're already building followers and people engaged because they know where the three of us are passionate about this in the same way you're passionate about yours.
Mike wants to not even release it and just call it a social
Continue on.
experiment and see what happens.
Well,
These aren't even plugged in. Just so you know.
well,
I was wondering if this was on.
Well, I said that at one point. I said, here we are. We're interviewing Homer Bush, and we haven't even released content. They're coming to us and asking us to interview them. And just based on what we've put out in terms of TikToks, Instagram.
I thought it was because we're handsome.
Well, I think so. But Anthony's done.
Looks has a lot to do with
I think
it.
100%.
That's why your show is successful.
Yeah, looks has a lot to do with
And-
it. I like to believe that.
100%. And we, Anthony and Dan are doing a great job at building and marketing this out. And I'm like, at this point, let's just keep it going. I said, why release it? Let's keep
But
the
let me ask
social
you a
experiment
question.
going.
Back to my original thing about community. Do you think if you guys created this in Iowa, it would do the same as it is here?
No.
Right, because you have your three successful men, right? Four. I'll count you in the corner because you're a big part of this. That's what the draw is immediately, right? They know what you're capable of. They know what they might learn from you. So why not, immediately try to give it a shot? If you were three people that weren't from around here and had absolutely no following or no successful background, I'm not quite sure that you would get the same responses you're getting. So I think you're cutting yourself a little short there.
So my social experiment is failing.
It's failing.
And if we're going to quickly jump back to looks, Dan's stealing my look. Have you noticed now he's backing a work shirt?
Mechanic today.
Now, I was a mechanic last week, and now you're the mechanic?
I got the message from you Saturday at 8 a.m. that I was stealing your style from wearing a T-shirt. So
something you said made me think of something, and I'm curious to see what everybody thinks about this. So you're talking about podcasts. Obviously, we're on a podcast. Podcasts have been around for a very, very long time. And when they first came out, no one cared. Does everybody remember?
They were only audio, and they were only on Apple.
Correct. But then they evolved. But even when they evolved, no one cared. I compare the podcast to the QR code. Prior to COVID, QR codes were great. But now in my position in my company, I would see other companies trying to sell the QR code as value. And it wasn't valuable because then you had to download an app. No one knew how to use it. Right. So sure, it could do cool stuff, but no one knew how to do it. Post-COVID, there's a QR code everywhere for everything because even grandma knows what to do because she learned. I feel like podcasts have been given new breath because of COVID because everyone was locked up. People decided that they could create content. I'm just curious. Am I wrong? Am I right?
No, you're right. But don't you think it just has to do with evolution in general? That's like saying, you're a lot younger than me, but at one time, somebody gave your grandparents a piece of plastic and said they can go into a store and purchase whatever they want.
Right. They didn't believe it.
Or how many years ago did your parents even say, I'm not putting my bank information on the computer?
Right.
That's insane. Or I'll take it a step further. How about the maniac that came up to you one day and said, I'm going to bottle water and sell it? What do you think his friends told him? Right? So I just think it's just evolution. The radio turned into television.
Right.
People thought that was going to be the devil, right? But it actually turned into something pretty big. And I think that podcast is just a similar way of disseminating information that people are now migrating to, just like everybody migrated from radio to the television. And there'll be something else in X amount of years that will be.
It'll be NFTs, but we'll talk about that on a
Right,
separate show.
it'll be holograms
Right,
that
it'll be
are,
holograms.
speaking, and when I'm dead, and I'll still have content created, which is another topic we can talk about.
Who isn't there already the musician who was dead who has content in a hologram?
Yeah, they did one for Biggie.
Tupac?
And
No,
Tupac.
Tupac,
Yeah,
right?
I think Biggie too.
And didn't Tupac have albums come out after he was dead?
Albums are easy.
He's probably still alive. That's why. But to a point,
That's a whole different story.
I watched the podcast on Mr. Beast one day, and he has like 4,000 pieces of content to release after he's dead.
Why not?
And you know why he said? He said, because I don't want my last post with me with a French fry in my mouth.
Makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense because you never know when your last post is going to be, right? So this is technology gives you the ability to live on for as long as you pretty much want to create content to get you out there, right? Right? Not every
As long as
content
we're
is
secure.
Well, not every content is evergreen that you can talk about, the World Series in February. People aren't really interested in anymore. But there is content that will live, to your point earlier, you said you filmed 12 podcasts and you didn't put one out yet. I guarantee if you put them out a year from now, they're still going to be relevant.
Right. Based on the topics we're discussing, where we're staying away from news and such. There's one podcast I think he wants us to get out quicker.
Yeah,
But
well,
There's this levels the playing field too. You don't have to be or grow up in broadcasting, or you don't have to necessarily be in the industry for your entire life. As long as you, like you said, if you're passionate about something, anybody could set this up. Anybody could Google it, YouTube it, figure out what to do, get better as they go along. You just need the right topic, to catch lightning, right?
and Scott Setaro.
And I think that's a good point, too, because I think a lot of people get caught up with the fact that they need the best of the best, and they need the best lighting and the best sound and the best audio. And we talked about it earlier. Some of the greatest podcasts that I watch, the audio sucks, but the content is so good that it doesn't matter to me. Right?
Walking up the block in a windy beach,
Right.
with his hat.
Right.
We know what we're talking about.
If it's content that migrates to me, I'm going to listen to it.
and you look at a lot of Gary V's stuff.
That's what we're talking about,
Sometimes
exactly.
he's walking up in New York City and just.
But he's also
30
a genius at cutting up information that he said 3 years ago and then implementing into a show today.
Right.
And you can hear like the bus in the background, but you're inside of an auditorium 5 seconds before that. So he's good at what he does, but his content is good. That's why.
That's our D-Rock.
So you just
right
said
there.
it's podcasts that you watch. How important is the video component to it?
I think the video component is so important because of the fact that audio is one dimensional, right? You can't repurpose audio. You can just kind of use audio. The video aspect allows us to now repurpose these things in so many different facets that allows people to drive you back to wherever it is that you want to drive them back, right? Obviously, shorts today are the big thing. And that's how most people do successfully promote their podcast, right? They come up with a 30 or 60-second clip of the best part of their podcast, come up with, the perfect thumbnail to your point earlier. You look at something first before you watch it, and that's why thumbnails are so important.
Yep.
I believe that's why it's so important because of the repurpose aspect of it. Do I think that most people will sit down and watch Joe Rogan for 2.5 hours? No, I don't think that we have the time to. I think that efficiency is why podcasts are also popular today. I can listen to 20 minutes of it on the way to work. I can listen to 20 minutes on the way home, but I might not have 40 minutes to sit in front of my computer and watch it, right? So from a marketing perspective, I think the video is very, very important.
And the ability to tag it, and the ability for SEO and for all the other ancillary things that I'm
Well, that's getting it out there.
wearing the marketing hat.
Yeah.
In other words, you can drive the traffic any way you want. So if you Google Scott Setaro, your real estate company will come up and your podcast.
Sure.
So it's almost as though if someone only knew you for the podcast, they'll also find out about Weichert, or vice versa, right?
Correct.
So it helps to a smaller brand or any brand looking to do this. If Mike started his own podcast specifically for geeks, right?
Digital
Specifically
Defenders.
Digital Defenders.
We have it.
But the beauty of it is that if people find you on this podcast and they click the link, they'll be redirected to Techie Geek. So they may not have had any idea about Techie Geek prior, but through the ancillary content, you can generate business and generate clicks, which I think
or
is-
anything that he wants to promote at that particular time.
Right.
Right. He can come up with his own microphone tomorrow, and now you're selling microphones.
We have to come
I
up
think you
with
gave him a good idea.
just
Find
gonna
us
say,
at the
I was waiting
M2
for him to say we already
Find
got
us
that.
at m2store.com.
Yeah, just
swag.
on a side note, I don't want to get off topic here, but this is the coolest place I've ever been to in my life.
There you
If I
go.
brought my kid here, he'd probably never leave. Anyone that has a chance to come by Techie Geek's office, please do. It's kind of like I don't know, Dave and Buster's meets a museum. So
Meets Marvel.
That's
and
yeah.
Star Wars.
No.
My kid doesn't want to leave here.
Yeah.
I mean, when he comes in here, he's in heaven.
I just don't have the money to replace the stuff my son's going to
When they
break.
break it, right?
Didn't your son just ask if he could take off of school Friday to come here?
He did. He did. He heard me talking to Mike. Is that Mike? I want to come over and do the A&F show. So, do you still feel like you're being deposed?
No.
Yeah, now it's coming
guys
to
are
levels.
Well,
actually,
good.
yeah, you
Why
guys
don't
are
you give it a
actually pretty
shot? Your turn. You got questions for us? What do you?
No, I guess if you were on my show, I would have questions for you guys. I was here for to maybe answer some of your questions.
Well, I got some. For those who are watching or listening, when did you start your podcast?
I started my podcast July of 2022.
All right. And how many episodes do we have?
30, somewhere in the 30s.
All right. So you have a lot of content.
We have
a lot of work.
Well, Too Many Topics has
Right.
30 something. Then I have a couple of off branches that I've tried and failed, and we got a few that are up and running now. But it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
So you got 30 under the belt. And in those 30, what have been the 2 or 3 most important things you've learned from beginning to end? I mean, I know we're always still learning, but did you have any like aha moments, or did you find a tool that assisted, or did you say to yourself one day, you know what, if I just tweaked this, or put the audio here, or made the caption like that?
Well, again, I'm constantly learning. But one thing, the 2 things that I've learned is, one, I'm more of a one-man show. I don't have the team that you guys have, right? So I've learned at a very, very early stage in it that do what you do best and pay for the rest, right?
Love that.
That's the one thing that I'll say. You can't do it all because you're gonna get paralyzed. You're not, and then what's gonna happen is, if you look at national numbers, I think podcasts fall off after 5 episodes because of that reason.
So maybe we shouldn't put any out. I think Mike's right.
Put out 6.
Yeah, just for fun. just to
Just to
beat
screw the
stat.
numbers,
Beat
right?
the
Just to
stat.
screw the numbers. And then with that authenticity, I believe that in the beginning, we just thought about doing it, right? We didn't really have a plan. We just said, hey, let's get some microphones, let's get some cameras, let's just get on there and talk a little bit. And then when you start to get response back from the public, like, hey, that really helped me, or that I really liked that episode, or I really enjoyed that, that's where you start to say, wow, this actually works. So now it's like, how do we find real good content that we can put out there that people can actually absorb and either learn something from or make them feel good? That's where that Too Many Topics comes from, because you're not just going to learn about sports. You're not going to learn about real estate. You might learn about ice baths. You might learn about, there's multiple
Do you really
facets.
do that? I see you on Instagram. What was it, last week?
Mike, unfortunately, if I had your money, I'd probably have a hologram of myself doing it, but I don't, and that's me. That's me doing it.
Feet pics on OnlyFans, a lot of
No,
interesting stuff.
yeah, that you don't want to see my feet pics, that's for sure.
So, what were you? You're an athlete?
No.
Is that why you do the ice
No,
baths?
I
or-
actually was an athlete when I was younger. I did a lot of boxing, MMA, and unfortunately, I had an accident and I had spine surgery. So that kind of put me out of that realm. And that was about 8 or 9 years ago, and now 8 or 9 years are coming back to haunt me. And just as the doctor told me, I'll be back in about 10 years. I'm trying not to get back, so I'm doing everything that a person of my age needs to do to be able to pick their kids up at night and hug them.
Do you try cryotherapy or any of the other alternatives?
Sure, I've done cryotherapy before. I don't have one of them in my house, so the next best thing
You could
is
go to Mike's house. He has one.
yeah, I'm sure he's got a few of them.
That's really
He's
cool.
probably got one downstairs.
Yeah.
There's a robot in it, though.
So
the break room.
the next best thing is just buying a bucket and filling it up with ice.
Okay.
Who's been, or who was the best guest you've had? Why were they the best?
And we had, every guest is good for a different reason, right? You have ones that are very informational. Like we talked earlier, you guys know Tom Bannis. We just shot a great episode with Tommy. Tommy has a great story to tell. I think everyone has a great story to tell, and that's a big part of my show, is having people come on and tell their stories, because I think a lot of times people think they're alone in their world, and they're not. They find out that, a lot of people have the same issues that they have, whether they're good or bad, successes, losses. learning experiences. So he was a great episode. I just had on a couple of comedians that, comedians are great. Everyone thinks they're a comedian, right? But when you truly have comedians on the show, I think that a lot of people like to laugh. Again, I think it goes back to that. Yeah, and that's a big part of me. I enjoy helping people, whether it's through whatever struggle. I wouldn't be in real estate if I didn't like helping people. I don't sell houses. I think, Mike, you probably sold more houses than I did. But I teach people how to sell real estate. I motivate people to sell real estate. And I think that's what I'm good at. And I think self-awareness is something that, a lot of people lack these days. So I enjoy that aspect of trying to bring content to people that can uplift them. I did a 75 hard challenge, a year ago. And I didn't know till after it was done the impact that it had on people. When people would come up to me and be like, "Oh, I didn't really want to work out that day, but I heard you, and you really you didn't."
I followed you.
It's not that you changed my life, but you maybe changed that day, right?
I didn't physically follow it, but I watched it.
And I think that's a passion of mine. And to be honest with you, as strange as it sounds, the episode that means the most to me is the first one that we did. Because it was us stepping out of our comfort zone. And that's my whole thing, of people stepping out of their comfort zones and being able to do things that they normally wouldn't do, get in a bath that's 32 degrees, right? Yeah. And I think that means the most to me, because that was something that was completely different from what my norm was 30 years in the real estate business to now sitting in front of a microphone and talking to people about who even knows who's listening, right? We're speaking right now, but we might be the only ones listening.
This is never getting released.
Again, they're not plugged in. I know you don't believe us, but the mic is not plugged in.
Yeah.
So I hope I answered your question without,
But yeah, everything you're saying of how you are and your personality is exactly why you're doing a podcast. You like to teach others, motivate them, everything that the person in front of the camera needs to be doing in this. And watching your show and, your podcasting, there's definitely been an improvement, right? I remember watching that first episode and being like, great content, but the audio is a little off, and we all go through that. And watching over the 30-something episodes, just the mass improvement. Us having what was that at when we were away at Cyborg? I think what was that, November, December
Cult convention.
I didn't even know how to make a zip file.
Camp.
He was helping me
really?
make zip files for me.
Come
he
on.
downloaded all of them for me.
Wow.
I don't know how to
you were
open them now.
downloading all the content. Yeah.
And
You
would
can't open them on your phone.
No, I don't know how to open them at all anymore. I'm going to have to call him.
That's how we do.
But I know I
teach
have
you,
them. That's
we
the
teach
main-
you how to zip it, and then I gotta get money somehow. But you were struggling at that point with, if I remember correctly, like finding a good editor and like how, because as the episodes were releasing, you were saying, all right, I'm not liking how they're coming out. I'm having some issues. How were you able to resolve that? Were you able, I definitely noticed there's the way they're cut up and edited, they're much more engaging. They're much more fun. You have a lot more text pop-ups and different things like.
Well, to Dan's point, right? You have to. That's to me the most time-consuming part of it.
Yeah.
So that's the part that I had to go out there and find someone. Unfortunately, it's not like trying to find a girl at the dance. And that sometimes is even more difficult. But it's trial and error. I had somebody that was very good, and the time frame was wrong, right? They were from Lithuania, so I had to wake up at 4:30 in the morning to contact them. Right. And then I brought some people on that were from America, and they told me they could do what I needed, but ultimately they couldn't do what I had. So it's a little bit of a trial and error, and then ultimately I found the right person also, to be very honest with you, in the very beginning, I don't think you know what you want, right? Because I don't think I knew exactly what I wanted. Now when I have a conversation with somebody, I know exactly what I want. I know what it's supposed to look like. I know what I want it to look like. And that's the fun of it. That's the journey, right? That's the growing process through the podcast that I enjoy the most. You're going to find some good people out there, and you're going to find some not so good ones. But that was pretty much a thing that I had to go through in probably 4 or 5 different editors before I found the right one.
And you, as you're learning what you want, you're also probably getting better at expressing what you want, knowing what to tell an editor, how to tell them this is the break points I want. This is and overall, the better you give them, the better they're going to produce.
Absolutely, and it comes down to work, right? I always say that success comes before work, only in the dictionary. You have to put the work in, right? You can't. At first, I just dumped a load of files onto people and said, "Oh, pick out what you think is funny." And because it was easy for me, right? I'm paying you for a job, and let's see what happens. Right. And then I realized that, cheap pays twice, but that's not kind of the right thing to say. But what I'm saying is when you don't put the work in, it's going to take you twice as long to get it done. So now I take a little bit more time making sure that I go through everything. I timestamp what I want, because a lot of reasons. One of the main reasons is what I think is funny, you might not think is funny. And what you think is funny, I might not think is funny. And since it's my podcast, I get to pick what's funny. You get to win. And so that's where that was another learning experience was, hey, you can't just dump things on people and expect them to be a mind reader. You have to kind of get involved and tell them what you want.
I think that's the hardest part with a lot of not just the ag industry and video editing. It's like everything. Almost people think, I hired you, probably in the marketing side as well. Deliver.
You figure it out.
And you're like, whoa, let's pull it back. What's your goals? What are we trying to do? And I think, that's across the board. But no, there's been a vast improvement.
I appreciate that.
And the content's great.
Well, I think what you're touching on, though, is something that is what you've brought up, Scott, a couple of times, is that you failed and that you've found the positives in it and that you have to learn. And what's great about this space is that it's forgivable. Right? It's a new thing, and people are expecting that. People are understanding that the first episode, the pilot episode, might not be the best, but watching the evolution and continuously learning.
The journey.
And that's right. The journey's the destination.
And you touch on a big point, too, because I think a lot of people don't jump out of their comfort zone because they're afraid of what people are going to say. Right? You have to understand that I enjoy the bad comments. My mother tells me how good I am. I don't need you to tell me how good I am. I need you to tell me how bad I am. I need you to tell me where I can improve. And as long as you fail forward, right, and you're learning something, I think that it's a win.
It goes back to, when I worked in corporate America and used to do the...
What was that, 20 minutes?
Probably like 15.
Cup of coffee.
Until they realized I didn't wear anything other than a T-shirt. But when you're in corporate America and you do a self-assessment form, and you're in there, and I was putting excellent, and one of my bosses sat with me and said, Mike, if you're always excellent, you have nowhere to work to. How can I ever give you a raise? How can I ever give you a and he goes, you can't be excellent. You need to be somewhere and work towards excellent. And that's the point. And you have to fail in any business, because if you don't fail, where are you going?
You know what the key to self-assessments are? Or any assessments to people? Take out number 7. Right? Because everybody picks 7. 7 is like the safe answer.
Right. Because it's not too good.
Right?
Not
it's not too bad. Take 7 out.
Come on. I get like 3/4 my raise you were planning to give me.
It's very comfortable. It's a unique spot to go to. So talk about the future and what the evolution is going to be. I know we're 30 episodes in, and that's a pretty significant project, in my opinion. I
appreciate that.
You didn't just throw some spaghetti at a wall. You invested.
Right.
So what do the next 30 look like? And what do you think the evolution
the
is?
next 30 are just, growth. Just continuing to get better, bringing on more guests, bringing on more content, finding out what people want, right? Because that's important too. Knowing what, not only what's passionate to me, because I think that's the most important thing. Sometimes just because something is hot and I'm not necessarily, tuned into it, or I don't feel great about it. Like, I don't do politics. That's just something that I stay away from. But it's funny because in the beginning, I did do a few posts on politics and I got tremendous returns on them. But it's just not what I'm comfortable doing. So I kind of, if you look at my old stuff, I scrapped that right away because it just wasn't something that I was passionate about. So I think that, going forward is building a community. That was my number one goal in this whole thing, was building a community. And then, almost the Gary Vee way, right? Gary Vee didn't come out with all these products. He built a community first, and now he can do whatever he wants.
Never sells, always educates.
Right. And I think that's the key, is just to continue to grow my community, try to develop content that people care about, and more importantly, not more importantly, because I never want to take away from my viewers, but also importantly is what I'm passionate about.
Now, have you been able to, or have you planned on how you can monetize this community?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, there's multiple ways of monetizing podcasts, and I think that's the part that everyone originally jumps in and says, "Oh, that's what we're going to do," it's not as easy as it sounds, right? It's again building that community first, and then you can kind of sell anything. But my thing, I to your point earlier, I believe YouTube is probably the fastest and easiest way to monetize. Can I run around Staten Island and get $150 from people? And yeah, but that's not kind of really what my goal is. Right. My goal is to kind of build something that people can be proud of, and then I can have some, just affiliate marketing programs that are attached to me, where I'll have an ad halfway through, like,
And the thing with that is, when you have the community and you do these ads and affiliates, people don't mind. When I watch a podcast,
you do it the right way.
I don't mind it being there, and even some of the podcast I watch is where I've learned and purchased some of these things I have, because I don't mind it. Again, they're passionate, and I'm like, okay, I don't mind.
But it's got to flow, right? Like right now, I have a partnership with Liquid IV. And, I could sit there and just read off of a card and say, well, Liquid IV does this to you, this to you, this to you. Or I could say, hey, Mike, you work out a lot. How do you stay hydrated when you work out?
But you would clearly know that's a lie. Well, so you would never say that to Mike.
I just pump myself a Liquid V.
Well, Mike, you sweat a lot.
How do you get all that?
So, 100. He's stacking the laugh tracks. 100%. I watch Linus Tech Tips. He's a technology YouTuber, and he has a podcast as well. But the way he does the segue into the advertisers and the sponsors is smart, and it's always a fun way, and that's why you don't mind it, right? We're all saying it's like the old. I love Howard Stern, but we all knew when you were listening to Howard Stern, he was going to, right before he went to commercial, he's going to read the live commercials and this, and he hated it. He hated reading them.
Absolutely, and to the point we said earlier about the segments of whatever it is that you're watching. When I start listening to a podcast and they start with advertisements, I'm gone. Right. You have to captivate somebody quickly. To your point earlier about the 3-6 seconds, whatever it's down to by now. Pretty soon it'll be a millisecond. You have to be able to get that information out there in the right way that people don't feel like you're selling it to them. You feel like you're educating them about it.
You might know the stat. Well, you're a big stats guy, but media is shifting towards now again doing reading on podcast of commercials and advertisements the way they used to do on radio. So remember when we were young, the radio would always go, and this was brought to you by Ovaltine, whatever the hell it was.
Yep.
But now the market is such that there is a demand for advertisers to approach you and say, just read this at the end. Or read this. So are you seeing that with your digital products and stuff like that, where they're requesting it? And
it's part of the evolution, like you talked about, right? Like the advertising follows consumers. So wherever there's a platform where more consumers are going to go, that's where advertisements go. That's why another reason why YouTube is very successful, because the viewership is there. It's a platform and a new outlet for you to be able to place advertisements on. Video is the fastest growing form of media, of consumption. So it's it's probably the only media type that's had consistent annual 100% growth. And it keeps going. So with that, there's an endless pool of inventory to be able to advertise, get your brand on, and figure out ways to be able to then communicate your message to qualified viewers.
And what I think is even better about that, from what I see now, is 2 years ago, 3 years ago, it was, we have to get the Kardashians. We have to get Mr. Beast. We have to get the guy with 170 million. Today, products don't want to pay that money anymore. So they're looking for, and this is where really opens up opportunities for people like us, is that micro influencer, right? That 10 to 20,000 to 30,000 follower, because A, it's a fraction of the price, and B, I'd rather have 10,000 loyal followers that are going to buy anything that I sell or any product that I try to promote, opposed to having 1 million followers where really, 10,000 are really my only true followers anyway. So I think that's another thing that's kind of misinterpreted a little bit out there, that it does. You don't need 100,000 followers to make money. You can have 10,000 loyal followers and do very, very well for yourself. The difference I see with, to your point about reading an ad, you have to have a certain following before they give you the freedom, the liberty to do it your way, right? Otherwise, they say, okay, well, you got 3,000 followers, and that's great. We'll pay you X amount of dollars, but you're saying exactly this, and so you eventually you get to the point where you have the freedom of kind of winging it a little bit, and they trust you. But I'm not quite there yet. But I do my research, and we'll get there.
Which one of the social media platforms have you found the most success with?
From a marketing perspective of the show,
marketing or distribution, where are you getting the most action, most clicks?
Instagram.
Instagram, okay.
Yeah. Instagram is the feeder, right? That's the one that drives most people to either the audio version or to YouTube. Right now, I've been heavily working on my YouTube. That was like the last part of what I did because, quite honestly, that was what I had the least amount of knowledge in. So you normally migrate to the stuff you know a little bit more about. I love TikTok because of the fact that you can have one video with 0 followers and it can go viral, right? Where Instagram still has that algorithm where you need to have a certain amount of followers for it to get out there, for it to reach certain levels to go whatever you want to call viral. So I do believe TikTok is a phenomenal outlet, to get viewers or to get your clips out there. But right now, because of the fact that I have more knowledge in Instagram,
Instagram's doing it for you. Good to know.
We're TikTok's guinea pigs.
Absolutely.
We're the first.
But aren't we all
we're
the
the
guinea pigs?
Well, kind of. But we're the only country that's monetized right now by TikTok. They're watching how Americans react, consume, interact, evolve with
Sell
ads.
it back to us.
Yep. And then we're the beta before they put it out in other markets and countries.
Yep.
Well, don't you think all of that, like facial recognition, where you think that putting that thing of fruit on your head is actually that you putting a fruit on your head, or do you think they're getting a digital? You would know better than me what the technology is.
Well, if you read the terms, they're pulling face points and they're getting all this data.
That's the thing.
Right?
Who
But
reads
you
the
think
terms?
it's the glasses that you're
Yeah,
wearing.
right,
That's
yeah.
the funny part. And they test this stuff. To your point, they beta this stuff out there to see if it works, and then they create a completely different
Right.
technology.
Now it's
with
built into a camera that's able to start doing facial recognition.
when you
and
get
tell
on a
you-
plane or
Right.
whatever the case may
There's
be.
cameras you could order now where for a business where you could program people's facing and it'll tell you Mike came in the office 8 a.m.
Look at the Ring camera. My door tells me when my wife walks in, if my
Packages
son's
were
outside.
delivered.
my
But
package
But not
is
only
there.
that, like on Facebook, if I put up a picture right now and you guys are in other pictures of
gonna-
mine,
Right.
and they'll tell me that
says it.
you're in
Yep.
the picture before I tell them
Yep.
that you're in the picture. So,
Auto take.
that's it's scary, but it is a little scary. I'll be honest with you. I think that there's a lot of information out there about people today, and you do have to be somewhat cognizant of that, right? You can't, especially with children. I have 2 young children, so as much as I encourage them to use these devices because I believe that this is the future, and I don't want my kid to use a pencil and pad in 2035. Right. But I think with everything, in moderation is important, right? Because it is extremely addictive to young children. It's extremely dangerous from a bullying perspective. It's extremely dangerous from hey, why isn't my life the way their life is? Everyone always shows the best parts of their
That's what
life.
social media is, right?
Right.
Now that's social, but I feel like what I've observed, and you could tell me better, but I feel like the podcast community is really supportive of each other.
Oh, absolutely.
They're willing to come on each other's podcast, share, have us back on yours,
Absolutely.
and different things like that. So I think it's kind of fascinating because it's a platform to try to get out there and show off what you're doing, but it's a really civil community.
Listen, that's how I've always built anything that I've done. Me blowing out your candles doesn't make mine burn brighter, right? I always believe that,
like that.
there's enough buildings in this world. I don't need to knock yours down to make mine bigger, right? That's why I was flattered to come on your guys' show.
Cancel the pie throw. We were going to throw a pie in his face. Cancel.
That was the end.
I believe that. I believe in coming together, and there's enough of this, and especially with guys like you that are going to put out really good content. Like I think you said to me that, you didn't realize that I would have liked it, if I saw it 10 hours earlier. I think that, for people to step out of their comfort zone and be able to create good content that's going to help somebody along the way in whatever facet of life it is a win for everyone.
Yeah. So I know Scott had to get out of here. So I just want to do today's reading. Today's video and podcast brought to you by Partners in Sound Productions.
That should have been like, hey,
Should we just bill him now for that?
Yeah, we'll send Ross a bill. I'll send him a bill.
we got to throw somebody's daughter a Sweet 16. Do you know anybody we could use?
To Partners in Sound Production. Send them an invoice.
We learned something today.
Is there anything we didn't touch on that you feel is important, especially to us as trying to educate us as to what we can do better or different?
You guys have, you guys are talented, and that's the number one thing that you have on your side.
See, he doesn't know us that well. I thought I was a good friend of his, but you could tell by
We
that
fake
comment.
it till you make
You
it.
guys are very talented. You have phenomenal equipment here. But for the outside world that wants to create one, my advice to them is not to worry about having the best equipment. Right. Some of the best podcasts I've seen were shot on an iPhone 10 and with the microphone on the guy's laptop. So I just think that you have something that you think other people want to hear, put it out there and see where it goes, and don't care what other people think about it.
It goes back to the way I golf. I don't really know how to golf, but I have great ping clubs, and you look really good on the golf course.
Yeah, well, sometimes looking good. But I used to say that to my son all the time. You'd rather look good and lose than look good and win, or the other way around. But look good and lose, and look bad and win.
So anyhow, Scott Setaro, Too Many Topics podcast. Thank you very much for coming
Guys,
here.
thank you. It was a pleasure, and best of luck in everything that you guys do. You're doing a great job, and I can't wait to see what else you have.
Thank you, Mike Bloomfield, Techie
Thank
Geek.
you.
Anthony Rapachulo, PR
a wrap.
Cision. I'm Dan Ryan.